Hello everyone, it's me Artur once again, and in this video we will further refine the dropdown that we've created before, and we will make sure that the pop-up is always shown in the correct place, no matter where the dropdown was placed. So let's quickly remind ourselves what we've achieved in the previous video. So that's our application that we've got, and we've got a bunch of dropdowns, but no matter which one you click, the dropdown will be always shown in the center of the screen. So that's what we need to take care of right now. Okay, so to place a widget where we want to, we will use a stack together with positioned widget, which are most likely already known to you, and the names speak for themselves. We could also use the overlay widget, but show dialog has a barrier color and dismiss out of the modal out of the box, and we need those two, so I think that's a better choice. We will need to do some calculations and consider a few corner cases, but let's start with a basic dropdown that will always appear just below the button, and we will then improve our code to handle edge cases currently. But yeah, first we need to start with the basics. Okay, so let's go to our dialog, custom dialog. Here we've got a method that's called show items, and that one is responsible for calling show dialog Flutter material package method. What we need to calculate the position of our dropdown is the position of the button itself. So because we need an X and Y of this button, and then add a little bit of offset and show the dropdown in that place. So apart from those two parameters that our method is currently taking, we will add a global key, because that's a common method to obtain current position of the widget, and that origin key will be the key of the drop-down button. Okay, so let's get a render box of that key. And that's how you usually do it. And based on that, we can get X offset. By calling local to global method. Oh, I misspelled it. And we can copy it and do the same for the Y. We also need a width of our drop-down button, and we can also get that one from the render box. Okay, and then we would like to pass those to our custom dialog, but first we need to add one more thing to the show dialog button, and that is to not to use the safe area. That will allow us to show our dropdown outside of safe area bounds, and we will take the safe area top and bottom padding into consideration on our own. So we really want to disable that feature of show dialog, because it will only make our calculations harder, and we are already calculating everything by ourselves, so that's completely fine. Now we are adding to custom dialog widget the parameters that we would like to pass here to then be able to calculate the correct position of the widget, and that's X origin offset and Y origin offset. Origin, so basically that will be X and Y coordinate of the top left corner of the dialog button widget, and also the width that we are getting from our render box. We might need that as well. Okay. Yeah, we need to add those to our constructor. Let Visual Studio do it for ourselves, but we need to add required modifier, and it's all good, but now we need to pass those here, obviously. Okay, and that's it. And it's not building at the moment because we added one more parameter to show items method, and that's the key. We are already creating that key here. So let's simply pass it. Which one was it? Was in the middle. Okay. And that key, as you can see, is assigned to a gesture detector. I mean, it's right on the top of the tree of that dialog button. So we add labels in the main Dart, so that's not a problem. It will be only the button, and that key is assigned to the highest widget in a widget tree of that widget of that dialog button. Okay, so we are passing our parameters, but we actually aren't doing anything with those yet. So first, let's prepare our stack for the calculations that we will work on in a minute. So we need to replace the align widget with positioned widget to be able to granularly control the position of our dropdown. We'll use top, yeah, actually it might be better to extract it to another method. It might not be useful at the moment, but it will be useful in the future. So let's create a method and call it position child. It will take X offset, Y offset, maximum height. That's something we need to calculate so that we prevent the overflows, because let's imagine an example when our dropdown would have like thousands of items. Obviously that's not an ideal scenario, but it might happen, and then it will overflow out of the screen. So we need to set a max height to it and make sure it's scrollable. We will also need a max width in case of any of drop-down items is like extremely long string. and also a child which should be named parameter, if you ask me. So let's do it. So okay, and that needs to return positioned widget, obviously with the child, and then top will be our Y offset, and height will be our drop-down height. We will align the drop-down to the left for now, so that will be our X offset. And we already got a child, so yeah, that's it. Why it's not saving? Okay. Now we need to use that method. Here in stack we will call position child, build content will be a child, and it also it will need our calculated positions, the X offset, Y offset, and so on. Let's set those to 0 for now, and height to, I don't know, like 200, and width to 200 as well. Now we can save it. It builds. Let's do a hot restart just to make sure it applies the changes. And as you can see, it gets shown, but as we are telling show dialog not to use safe area, it's rendered out of the bounds. We can set it, those offsets to like 100, and it's a bit better right now. The height is not right yet. But yeah, as you can see, we can now control the position of our drop down. So everything is going pretty well, and what we've got left are the calculations. So we need to calculate an actual X offset, Y offset, height, and width of our drop down, and then simply pass them to position child, and that's it. That will be everything. So here in the build method, we already have a layout builder, and we've got that because it provides us with constraints that we need to take into consideration. So let's start with the obvious thing, that is the height, and we will handle overflows in a minute. So we've got our sizes in constants, dart, if you don't remember, and here we've got, for example, something that's called collapsed height or close header height. That will be that's the header here in the dropdown. So the height of our dropdown, the sum of the heights, is close header height. Also the items length multiplied by the item height, and that's it. We could now pass it. That was the third parameter, I believe. We can now pass it right here, and as you can see, something is missing, and that's the border width. Voila, works just fine. Okay. What we will need for our calculations is the top constraint and bottom constraint. So that's the safe area padding at the bottom and at the top. We'll need those to make sure our dropdown doesn't overflow out of the screen. But maybe first let's start with the width, because we already got the height. We'll expand that in a minute, but as we've got height, let's also make sure that we've got our width. And the width would be constraints, okay, max width. So that in that case, that's a width of the whole screen. So we need to subtract origin offset. So that's an initial X coordinate from that, because yeah, we'll show the drop down in that place. And what we also want to subtract is horizontal padding of a model, because we don't want it to be sticked to the edge of the device. We want a tiny bit of padding here, and we've already got that in our constants file. So yeah, that will be our max width, and we can now pass it right here. You don't see an effect yet. I mean, it's a max width, it's not a width. The whole drop down will take as much place as it needs to. So for example, if one of our drop down items would be extremely long, and we actually need to do a hot restart after that. Yeah, you will see a difference once we've got the X offset done correctly. Let's set it to 69. As you can see, it's not going out of the screen. But it's sticky to the right side. So something is not working correctly yet. We'll handle that in a minute. Okay, let's go back to our overflow calculations. We don't want our model to go out of the screen. We will need the constraints for that. Let's calculate a top constraint. I mean the paddings at the top. That's the up bar. Height, as we are having it in our application, and also safe area top padding. We can get it with media query. And our added padding. We also need a bottom constraint. And that, and we've got all of that in our media query. So in the case of iPhone 12 Pro that we are running right here, that's the navigation area at the bottom of the screen. So padding bottom. And also our added padding. Okay, as we've got those, we can calculate the Y offset. Right now, as you can see, we are hard coding it, but obviously we don't want to use that. Let's call it calculated Y offset, and that would be our origin offset plus collapsed height, that's a height of the button itself. And I would also add a tiny bit of padding between those two, so the open modal won't stick to our button, but it will have a tiny bit of space above it. And we've got a constant for that, and that's modal vertical padding. So that will be our calculated Y offset. We can already use that. And as for the X offset, we can actually simply use X origin offset, because we want our drop down to start in the same place as the drop down button. So let's save it. And as you can see, we've got our drop down positioned correctly. So that's it. I think that will be a wrap up of part number 2, and we will add an additional part number 3, in which we will handle various edge cases, and more on that in the next part.